sack in one hand and a fistful of straw in the other. The straw was to stuff a mattress. It wasn't for spinning. The maid's surprised face suddenly turned hard. She scooted back and reached for something behind her, a poker, and pointed it right at me. "Get out, you little rascal. There's nothing in here for you to steal." "I wasn't." She whacked me on the shoulder with the poker. "Get out." She whacked me again. "You filthy mongrel, get out." I scrambled to my feet. My satchel clutched to me. I tried to reach for the door, but the woman swung at me again, and I rolled to the other side of the room. "Thief," the woman shrieked. "Thief!" I ducked as she jabbed at me again. "Thief in the castle!" She lunged with the poker until I was pressed against the window. A window! I hadn't gone up any stairs, so the ground must be just below. I fumbled behind me until I found the latch. The window flew open and I tumbled out, landing flat on my back. All the air was knocked out of me and sparks flew in my eyes, but I had to run because the maid's bellowing for sure was going to bring the guards after me at any moment. I ran along the castle walls until I found some bushes to hide in, then dove in. Arr! They were full of thorns. I held still and didn't breathe. Thorns stuck at me everywhere, but I bit down on my tongue and watched as the guards came in through the window I'd fallen out of. A few jumped out and walked around searching. One came to the very bush I was hiding in, but it was so dark and I was so still he didn't see me. Soon, they were all gone. I forced myself to wait in the bush a little longer, and while I did, all my pain sank in. My head and back were sore from the fall, and my shoulders stung from the maid's whack. I had a needle thorn sticking in my head and arms, but especially in my bottom. Destiny can be so cruel. I looked at the sky, wondering how long before dawn. The sky was still dark, but there couldn't have been more than a few hours left, maybe even less. How much straw had the king given Opal to spin? And how long did she have to spin it? I'd better find her fast. Slowly I crept out of the bush and tried to remove all the thorns. The earth was wet and squishy beneath my feet, so my steps made squelching sounds. I froze and waited a moment for movement or noise. All was still. Heroic rescues are not as glamorous as people imagine, I thought as I squished along the muck. The next step was to find a tower. I was sure Opal would be locked up in one. In grand stories, damsels in distress were always trapped in towers. That was the point of towers, so no one could rescue you unless your hair was a mile long. Opal's hair wasn't that long, so how would I get in? There were many towers in the castle. Which tower? Think. Most of the windows were dark, but 2 towers had lights on in them, and I could see. I considered the location of each tower. They were on opposite ends of the castle. On one end was the main gate to the castle, where the king and queen and other royal guests made their grand entrances. On the other end were stables and blacksmith, where there were piles and piles of straw. If you needed to fill a room with straw, it would be better if the room were near the straw. I approached the tower on the stable side. There was no one around, not even guards, which seemed odd. I put my hands on the tower wall, feeling around. A few stones budged. I could fit my hands easily in the cracks. I pulled out one stone completely. You'd think someone as rich as King Barf would keep his castle in better repair. There were so many holes and loose stones. But I suppose King Barf didn't worry much about the outside of his castle. He probably paid more attention to the inside, where all the gold was. I started to climb. It wasn't so difficult, almost like climbing a tree. I had to test each hold to make sure it would support my weight. Being small and skinny was really working in my favor. If I were a hulking armor-clad hero, the tower would have crumpled like dry bread. Tired and out of breath, I finally reached the window. Mercifully, it was open. I heard whimpering and sniffling. Someone was crying. It had to be Opal. With the last of my strength, I pulled myself up, slid over the windowsill, and flopped on the ground like a giant slug. Oh! Opal rushed to the fireplace and grabbed a poker. She stood over me. The poker raised over her head. I flinched. Opal lowered her weapon and stared at me with her big blue eyes. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to rescue you," I said. She stared at me blankly, so blankly I thought maybe she hadn't heard me, and then she laughed. She laughed and laughed high and shrill, and finally she snorted. Aren't you the one they called Butt? I wasn't exactly the heroic welcome I'd hoped for. Rump, I said. They call me Rump. Rump, she said, holding back a laugh. Rump, my hero. Then she burst into more laughter. She leaned over, holding her stomach. She hee-heed and ha-ha'd and giggle-gaggled and fell into the straw, rolling in it like one of her brothers. And then suddenly she was crying. Not just whimper, whimper, sniffle, snuffle crying. Her whole body heaved with sobs and snot ran down her face, and she didn't even bother to wipe it off. Help me? You? She sobbed. I'm supposed to turn all this straw into gold because my father told the king I could. I was getting nervous about all the noise she was making. What if someone came into the room to see if she was all right? Opal sobbed again. Why did he do that? Because I can spin the straw into gold, I said. Your father knows I can. I think that's why he told the king. He didn't think he would take you away. He thought the king would just ask for more gold. Opal stopped crying and wiped the snot from her nose on her sleeve. You? The gold? You can spin the gold? I was surprised that she was so surprised. Has she never seen gold before? Hadn't she wondered what I'd been trading for food all these months? Yes, I can spin the gold. Opal wrinkled her nose as if I smelled rancid. Prove it. Spin all of that to gold. She pointed to the heaping pile of straw in the corner. It was more than I had ever spun at once, maybe 3 or 4 mattresses full. In front of it was a spinning wheel, big and shiny, the wood freshly carved and polished. Well, said Opal. She was tapping her foot impatiently. What are you waiting for? She didn't look so sweet or innocent anymore. I sat down at the wheel and took a few straws in my hand. I could see things through Opal's eyes now. How ridiculous this seemed. Me spin straw into gold? How could a small, foolish boy possibly do such a thing? I had thought myself a great hero, but now I saw how silly I looked. With shaking hands, I fed the straw through the wheel and spun, holding my breath, ready for it to break and fall to the ground, just to mock me. Whirl, whirl, whirl. Gold wrapped into the bobbin. I released my breath. Opal gasped and clamped her hands to her mouth. Her eyes showed the same greedy gleam I knew so well from the miller. She reached to touch the gold, but my hand came down over the bobbin. What will you give me? I asked. Give you? I have to give you something? You want me to spin a pile of straw into gold for nothing? What do you want? I thought of all the things I wanted, more than food on the mountain, a horse to replace nothing, more hens at the family, a family, my whole name. But the mere thought of asking of anything made my tongue swell and my mouth clamp. Just as the witch had said, I could make no requests, only beg and take what was offered. What will you give me? I asked. Opal wound her tongue around her mouth, eyes blank. She put her finger out to her lips and then her hands on her waist. Oh, bother. What was going through her mind? I was beginning to suspect that the name Opal bestowed a destiny that gave you lots of looks, but maybe not so many brains. Finally, she felt her neck. I will give you my necklace, she said, and relief washed over me at once. My father gave it to me, and it's made of pure gold. Probably gold I spun. I took the necklace and stuffed it in my pocket, breathing deeply. This wasn't so bad. Shut the windows, I said, getting down to business. They were still gaping open for my arrival. I like the fresh air. The straw makes me sneeze. I'm going to make a pile of gold. Every pixie within a mile of here will be swarming this room if you leave those windows open. And that will probably be worse than a sneeze. She scowled at me and shut the windows, and I began to spin again. Whirl, whirl, whirl. Bit by bit, I worked on the pile of straw. As it dwindled, a stack of gold took its place. Opal watched, transfixed for a while, and then fell asleep on the floor. A skein of gold clutched her hands. I spun the last of the straw just as the sky turned purple. I crawled out the window, and my eyes were so heavy and my limbs were so tired. I had to concentrate extra hard just to make my fingers grip the wall. I had done my duty, and now I could go home. But first I needed to eat and rest a little. I made my way across the castle grounds to the stables, where I ate the rest of the bread from my satchel. I was so thirsty, I drank water from a horse's trough. The horse didn't seem to mind. Then I found an empty stall and made myself a nest of straw. I was becoming quite fond of straw. It's comfortable to sleep in, and pixies don't like it. Straw is better than gold, I thought. Just as I was drifting to sleep, I swore to myself that I would never spin again. Never. And I didn't want to look at gold ever again. But I was very tired, and I wasn't thinking clearly. And that is the end of chapter 14.